Okay, welcome back to part two. So as I was mentioning here, the Alger Hiss incident here, he's accused of being a communist. Understand that Alger Hiss was not convicted of being a communist. He was convicted of what's called perjury, meaning he lied about it under oath after raising his hand and promising that he would tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And then lying under oath. That's what nailed him. But that's not what people thought about. Oh, he's convicted of being a communist. And he might have been a communist, but once again, his crime would be not because he was a communist, it's because he passed on top secret materials from the State Department to Whittaker Chambers. But nonetheless, it was perjury that he had gotten in trouble for. So when this happened, once again, people thought, Alger Hiss is a communist spy. He's trying to bring down the government, and people, got whipped up into a frenzy about it because of communism. And then you've got the Rosenbergs. So a lot of people, when the Soviet Union revealed that they had successfully tested their first atom bomb, a lot of people doubted that the Soviet Union had the capability to be able to build an atomic bomb and to test it in 1949 without having help or secrets revealed to them from the United States. So there began a hunt to track down a possible source that where this information might have come from. Well, the trail led to a British scientist. And this British scientist admitted that he had been sending information to Russia as a spy, and that he had been gathering evidence, or not gathering evidence, but had been gathering this secret information from the United States in various locations. And he led them to specifically this guy named Julius Rosenberg. And then, of course, his wife Ethel got wrapped into this as well. Well, Julius had previously worked for the U.S. government as an engineer, and then Ethel's brother worked in the machine shop in Los Alamos, where they built the first atomic bomb and tested it. And so, as an engineer for the United States government and as a machinist, these people were able to gather information, or they were accused of gathering information, and then passing those government secrets on to this British scientist, who then passed them on to Russia. Both people were known to be communists anyway, and members of the Communist Party, and so this looked even worse for the Rosenbergs. They eventually were charged by the U.S. government with being in charge of a Soviet spy ring and passing on atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. Both people were convicted, both Ethel and Julius, and they were sentenced to death, and they were put to death. There were a lot of protests saying that this violated their rights. There was no real evidence. It was just because of this Red Scare. But June 1953, both of them were executed. Now, later on down the road, after time progresses, U.S. government documents that are top secret governments will eventually be what are called declassified, and anybody can access these things, these documents. And so in 1995, the intelligence that was gathered, all the evidence that was gathered on the Rosenbergs was released in what's called the Project Venona papers. And so this was the investigation on the Rosenbergs and all the evidence that was gathered. So once people got a really good look at all the evidence, it was pretty clear that the Rosenbergs were pretty guilty. They were guilty. And that's the conclusion, that the conviction that they had was indeed appropriate. A lot of people, though, questioned whether or not what they did was worthy of the death penalty. That was another thing that came up. That's another reason why so many people protested the Rosenberg trial, is because they thought that the punishment did not fit the crime, okay, and that they were sentenced to death because of this public frenzy and this Red Scare, and people, this was their outlet to feel like they were combating communism in America by putting these people to death. So Red Scare spreads. The Red Scare spreads. It got to the point where universities and businesses, where, let's say this university over here is fearful that people who work in the university might be communists. So they conduct their own screening investigations into the people that are employed by the university. Businesses, let's say if I own a big business and I'm afraid that there might be communists in my business, I will conduct a business, a screening of my employees to determine if they're communists. And then, of course, lots of people were fired for being suspected communists. And then you have what's called the Taft-Hartley Act. If you remember the Wagner Act, which was an act that protected unions that had been passed during the Great Depression with the whole New Deal project. Well, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed in 1947, and this required union leaders to take oaths against communism. And so in order to exist or to be allowed to have these freedoms that the Wagner Act offered. And so the Taft-Hartley Act was looked at as a backtrack on the legitimacy of unions. It was hurting unions. Okay, so in order to stay legitimate, a lot of unions began to purge themselves of communists. They started to investigate themselves, their own union, to determine if they had communists among them, and they agreed that they would kick them out in order to be able to still have the advantages of the Wagner Act, for example. And then you've got Senator Joseph McCarthy. So in February 1950, Joseph McCarthy, who was a Wisconsin senator, gave a speech. Joseph McCarthy was not a particularly good senator. He was not known for doing anything worthy of note. And so a lot of people accused him of taking his next steps here in order to make himself relevant, in order to make himself important. And so McCarthy kind of steps out of the shadows here with this Red Scare and makes himself a big-time player on the anti-communist scene. So in Ohio, he was asked to speak at a Republican gathering, and it was a Abraham Lincoln Day celebration. Lincoln being the first Republican president and all this stuff. And so different Republican parties around the country had their little dinners, and they would invite important people from the Republican Party to come and speak to them. And so this group in Ohio invited Joseph McCarthy to come and talk to him. So as he was speaking, he gave this speech about the horrible nature of communism, how evil it is, and things like that. And then he held up a piece of paper. And he claimed that on that piece of paper, he had a name of 205 people that worked in the State Department that were confirmed communists. And people, everybody grabbed their chest, and the ladies clutched their pearls, and they said, communists in the State Department? And he said that he was going to have to show that, I have this list to prove. Well, the next night, he went and spoke to a group in Salt Lake City, and the number changed from 205 to like 201. And so there were a lot of things that were very inconsistent about McCarthy's claims, and he never produced the list. He never gave the list to the media or to anybody else. He kept it secret, so that way these people wouldn't know he's coming after him. But that seems sketchy too. But McCarthy then became this knight that was on a crusade to weed out communists. So he starts throwing accusations left and right to draw attention to himself. In his election in Wisconsin, he was running again for a second term. And of course, he accused his opponent, who was a Democrat, that he was communistically inclined. It was like anybody who opposed McCarthy or questioned him, of course, got put on the list of suspected communists. And this guy just went crazy with the accusations. In 1952, the Republicans took over Congress, and McCarthy became the chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Investigations. And so as the chairman of this subcommittee, now he had a place where he could force people to come and testify before his committee about their possible communist activities. So this is like a second HUAC that we're talking about, House on Un-American Activities. And this is where McCarthy used his platform to just be able to throw accusations at anybody and everybody. And really, he never produced any evidence. Nobody that he ever accused or forced to testify before his subcommittee on investigations ever was committed of any crimes. But when he threw out an accusation at him, that begins the blacklist. And so he forced even government officials to come and testify before his committee about their alleged communist influences or activities and things like that. And the investigation really turns into a witch hunt. If those people gave up names and the focus turned away from them and it went to other people, and it just blew up. More often than not, there was no evidence to justify any of the outrageous accusations. And so McCarthy's tactics of throwing accusations, no evidence, being loud, having no supporting evidence, becomes known as McCarthyism. His tactics become known as McCarthyism. Okay? Now, McCarthy eventually got brought down. People got sick and tired of hearing him. People got sick and tired of his accusations with zero support. And then finally, what happened is he started throwing crazy accusations at the U.S. Army. These were men who were veterans, who were high-up leaders of the U.S. Army. He required them to come and testify before his committee. And, of course, the U.S. Army hired a lawyer to defend them. And the lawyer that was to defend the U.S. Army was a guy named Joseph Welch. Here in the picture here, you've got McCarthy with the glasses on. You've got this military officer in the middle, and then you've got Joseph Welch. Now, ultimately, here's what happened. And it came out in the investigation and the testimony that ultimately Joseph McCarthy had a guy on his staff named Roy Cohen. And Roy Cohen was drafted to go into the military. And this is during the Korean War. And Roy Cohen didn't want to go. And so he called the U.S. military basically and said, I am Joseph McCarthy's right-hand man. I want a desk job. I don't want to have to go to war. And McCarthy began pressing the U.S. Army to put Roy Cohen in an easy job. And so when they refused to do that, then all of a sudden the accusations started to fly about the U.S. Army. And Joseph Welch brought all this stuff up. Well, at one point during this hearing, Joseph Welch just went off on Joseph McCarthy and said, you have no character, you have no evidence, everybody's sick of your accusations. And they're sick about your deflection. At one point, McCarthy looked at Joseph Welch and said, Joseph Welch, do you know about this guy named Fisher that works in your law firm? Well, he's a communist. And it totally was trying to change the topic of conversation to something completely off topic, and Welch just let him have it. If you're really interested, I'll show you the clip about it. But after Welch just rips McCarthy in this hearing, you can hear applause from the people who are watching the hearing that are actually in the room. And at that point, people just were sick. They were sick of McCarthy and all of his accusations, all of his tactics. He served out the rest of his term and then died in 1957. And there's all sorts of crazy things and theories about McCarthy and who he was really like and what he was really like. But McCarthy's tactics, you still see him in politics to this day. If you can cast doubt, if you can throw accusations, you don't even have to have any evidence. If you can just throw accusations, that will deflect away from you and onto them. So, all right. So make sure you turn in these notes, and that's it. So I'll see you on Monday. Have a good weekend and try to stay out of trouble. Okay.